mind is you want to take this nut apart. Now your trap, this is called a P-trap, your trap may look a little different than what you see here. This is more of a heavy-duty trap, so if yours doesn't look just like this, chances are it's actually going to be a little easier for you. You'll have a nut here, a nut over here, and then another nut here that you'll need to take apart. The only two that you actually need to take apart are this one and the one going up to the drain in the sink. So we're going to go ahead and pop this off. You don't always even need a wrench to get this apart, but sometimes you do. The other thing to keep in mind is this trap holds water, so when you take that loose, you're going to get water. Now typically there's no sealant on the smaller size traps. On this type, you're going to have pipe dope on this back nut. This one has a washer in it, so it doesn't need any sort of sealant. This back one will have pipe dope on the threads to keep it from leaking. Be careful as you're taking this off. Usually you want to use two hands because you don't want this thing just to come off and fall and splash water everywhere. And those are usually pretty gross. Alright, once you have the trap off, next you want to take this ring. You're going to loosen it. Now typically there's not going to be anywhere for it to fall because you've got the pop-up assembly that comes into the side here. Once this is loosened, this is what holds this whole drain to the sink. And then you can kind of usually push this into the sink itself. And once it's up in the sink, this piece can come out. That's usually really gross too. Once you've pushed it up, you can unscrew. So you want to hold one hand underneath and use a larger pair of channel locks to grab it up here and just unscrew it. Different pop-ups are shaped and assembled in different ways. This one has a very small ring up top, and the threaded part comes all the way up through. Some of them have the part that goes through actually mounted to this top piece that goes all the way through and screws in underneath the sink there. Either way, it's going to come apart between here somewhere, so those two pieces have to unscrew. And next thing I'm going to do is just clean this up. And again, we're just trying to get a good seal with the new one here. So you don't necessarily have to clean down in there, but I do just because it's gross. So let's assemble the drain part of the pop-up. Here's the piece that's going to plug it up. This part unscrews just like what we just unscrewed there. This one's a plastic one. So one thing I would caution you with if you have a plastic one you're putting in is don't over tighten any of these fittings because you can break it that way. Because of the way this one is shaped, I'm going to need to probably thread this up so that I can get my pipe dope in place. You're going to want essentially everything under this hole you're going to want pipe dope. It has this rubber washer here. That's going to seal it to the bottom of the sink. But water can still get between this nut and the threads, so you want to make sure that you get some sealant on those threads. I'm going to screw that back down all the way as far as it can go. I'm probably going to actually put another little bit of pipe dope on those threads there. Spread it around a little bit before I push that washer down, like so. Then I'm also going to seal the threads at the top. Like so. Now, the next step is this piece. We want to make sure we get a good seal between it and the sink as well. And for that, we're going to use plumber's putty. Get you a snake of that. Push it around this. Squish it out a little bit there. And then the threads are going to seal on this. Now, again, one hand underneath, I'm going to put it in just like this. This is pointing back because that's where the pop-up's going to go in. I'm going to push that up from the bottom. Tighten this down from the top. Just tighten this by hand. No need to use a wrench to put it on. And then I usually pull from the bottom, sort of squishing it down in there, and then start tightening up that nut from the bottom. That nut there. You want to get this pretty tight. You want to make sure this washer here is sitting up in the opening, and as you're tightening, make sure that it's tightening up into that opening, because that's got to seal it so that no water comes out this connection here. I'm gonna go ahead and finish tightening this up, and then we'll put the pop assembly together. Now, I will at this point take my knife, and if you don't have a knife like this, you take a screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, and just run it around the edge of that piece there, and just get the rest of that putty out of there. All right. Now this piece can slide in. Put this toward the back, because you're gonna have to fish the plunger. I'm sorry, fish the rod into this plunger here that will activate it once it's ready to go. Also, you may see this putty continue to squeeze out. Just go through the same process with the knife again and scrape it around again. As it squeezes out, you may want to go ahead, if you do get a lot of putty coming out here, you may want to go ahead and tighten, again, very gently, be careful, tighten that other nut underneath a little bit more as this putty gets settled into place. So at this point, I'm going to take this rod here. It's going to go through the back of the faucet. There's a hole in the back of the faucet here for this lift. At its finish, it's going to sit about right here. The angle on it will help it to stay up at about this level. And I'll show you how to do that from underneath. But for now, I'm just setting it back there so we can go underneath and get it set up. All right, so my two pieces here, that are the other two pieces of the pop-up assembly. We've got this piece, which will slide into the pipe from the back, and this plastic piece will connect and go into the hole that's in the plunger that I showed you a second ago. And then this piece connects the rod that's coming down through the faucet and connects it to this piece, so it will lift up and down. So this nut here will come off. Be careful, sometimes the washer that's inside will be kind of falling out when you take this off. So if something does fall out, you'll see here there's it's rounded so that it fits around the ball on here. So just make sure that you put it back in so that the rounded part is facing toward the back, so the ball sits down into it. This little clip, if you push on the back side, it will start to kind of pinch it together and it will pop off. Slide that in, feel around for the hole in that pop-up. And once you find it, you'll see that that pop-up will go up and down, and if you pull on it, it will not come out if you have it in the right location. And then we slide this back on and screw it in. You do not need to use a wrench on this nut. Just tighten it up, hand tight, not even super tight. If it starts leaking, you can tighten it up a little bit more, but that's about it. All right, so the next thing that you want to do is you want to get a rough estimate of where this needs to connect. So like I said before, this bar here will actually sit about right here. So I usually check it to see where roughly where it's going to end up. Just kind of eyeball it and then hold this to roughly that location. See which one of these holes is the closest. And okay, it's the second hole. So then I slide my clip on, just put one hole in, put my flat piece on the second hole. I can slide the whole thing back and push that around. Then slide this rod up and then down in through both of these, the holes in this. Then I'm going to go up on top. Requires a little bit of effort here. I'm going to hold this where it needs to go, and then from underneath I'm going to tighten the screw. I'm going to come under here and I'm going to tighten this screw to where it holds this rod where it needs to go. And you don't want this in a bind. You want it to kind of go together easily. because if it's in a bind, if you're trying to bend this one way or the other to get it to line up, eventually what's going to happen is you're going to keep pulling this up, and it's just going to pull it out of either out of this or off of the rod here. So you're going to be constantly having trouble with it. So I usually line it up as straight as I can, tighten this up, go on top, and check it to see how it looks. It actually looks pretty good. I usually like it about right there, so it's easy to reach. So I'm going to hold it right there and go ahead and get that tightened up. Then your final step to getting this all back together is putting this trap back in. You want to grab the nut off of your old trap assembly there, as long as it's intact. If it's not, if you had to go get a new trap and everything, this washer, this pipe, is 1.25 inches, and the trap is going to be 1.5 inches usually. They do make very small 1.25 inch traps. Typically it's going to be 1.5 inches. So every trap that you get will come with an 1.25 inch washer, or an 1.25 to 1.5 washer. It'll be thicker than all the other washers that are in the kit. This is an 1.25 inch, has an 1.25 inch nut on it, or with it, and my trap is 1.5 inches by 1.25 inches. So it's already adjusted for the smaller connection there, and it's just a matter of getting this back together, getting everything tightened back up. And we should be ready to go. You do want to use a wrench on these. You don't have to kill it, but you do want to turn it, maybe tighten it all the way by hand. I'm turning this back one a little bit more than I would turn the smaller ones, because it has pipe dope instead of a washer in here. So I just want to make sure it's all the way tightened up. And then this smaller one, basically I would usually hand tighten it and then turn it maybe another quarter turn. Then you just want to turn on the water. I usually actually close off the drain, run some water, fill it up, and watch underneath. Make sure at this point, when it's stopped up, you want to make sure there's no water coming out of this connection, because with the drain stopped up, that's the only place that it's going to be able to come out. So it's either going to come out around this washer or through these threads here. That's the only place that water can get to with the drain line stopped up. Once it's full, I just check underneath, make sure there's no water coming out, make sure we're all dry. Then, typically from underneath, I'll let the water out. And I check around the back of this, make sure no water's coming out here, make sure we're not getting any water around this fitting and around this fitting. And I've just let a lot of water through here, more water that's going to be running through here generally, because usually we just wash our hands at the sink. And so as long as we're not seeing any leaks, any drips from the water line, from the drain, then we're good to go. If you found this helpful, go ahead and like the video. Subscribe if you haven't. If you're interested in seeing more tips or tricks about projects you can do around your house, I'll be glad to help you out. And thanks again for tuning in. Have a great day.